Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Curse of Strahd, Twice Bitten. It's been a bit of a while, but glad to have you all back here. This is, as always, Dragnacarta, your host and DM. I'm joined here by I believe the full cast of Twice Bitten, actually. We managed to wrangle everyone.
Somehow.
Plus, somehow, I guess Labor Day helps with that. Plus, we've also got two other special guests. Our producer, Jeplukas, who's usually behind the scenes, making everything run, and is currently making sure we stream properly without anything getting set on fire, as well as Harrison, our Foundry VTT consultant and friend of the stream. So, everyone say hello.
Hi.
Welcome to After Dark.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to After Brunch.
Welcome to
Jack and
Before
Serena, you
Brunch.
two are banned to horny jail. To everyone else. All right, so that was an eventful episode this past Saturday. I was like, hey, we're gonna get out of the house by like break. Nope.
That sure did happen.
I don't remember anything. I was drunk the whole time.
Oh yeah, this is, by the way, full spoilers for latest episode. So if you have not seen it yet, it just went up on YouTube this morning. Go check it out on the Curse of Strahd YouTube channel. From this point forward, full spoilers in effect.
And you do want to check this one out. It's a doozy.
But perhaps not as your first episode ever.
Yeah, that one might be a bit weird.
All we can say is don't get attached to anyone.
Get attached to everybody and break your heart.
Yeah, fiercely.
Attached to Truffle.
He is, after all, best boy.
Yep.
Get
In
attached
lieu
to
of
Death
Lancelot. Oh yeah, get very attached to the house.
Okay, I'm going to share some behind-the-scenes information here about Truffle, which is that when I first had this and my character idea on my character sheet, I did so fully assuming and intending for Truffle to be killed off-screen in session 0 as part of coming into Barovia.
What?
How
dare you?
This was back when we thought the campaign was going to be maybe more survival horror-y. I don't know how much we're going to talk about.
Yeah, go for it.
No, that makes sense. It's like the dead parent rule.
Yeah.
Okay, no, makes sense when we were gonna take away all our stuff and all that. Makes sense.
Or
Yeah.
we would have just used him in the soup.
Yeah. But I am very glad he didn't. Him, and especially him and Amity's interactions, have been a real spark of life and Twice Bitten. I've enjoyed him a bunch.
Aw.
Yeah. Although I admit, I was not expecting him to survive Death House.
Yeah.
That was the way you were gunning for him. I mean,
Look, sometimes a man's gotta do what a man's gotta do.
I just love that everyone thought it was going to be Metreon. It was going to kill the pig.
Oh, look, he's look at Mr. Morally Dubious over here. He'll be the one to shoot the pig, and then nope.
Yeah.
I was really
Dad.
hoping that Truffle would look over at Kiva and be like, "That bitch killed me. It kicked me. Kill her."
Never trust elves. That's all Truffle
On that
knows.
note, Serena, you're our curator for today's stream. Where are we starting?
We are going to be starting with some general feedback for episodes 2 to 5.
So, how y'all feeling?
Oh my god.
That's
This
about
is
right.
a-
I'm feeling okay.
Yeah.
Also,
I mean, I enjoyed it.
Oh yes, so much. This is I mean, I knew y'all were good, but you are a tremendous amount of fun to play with. Holy shit. You're inventive and your characters are fun and you actually prompt shit and bounce off each other, and it's lovely. It's really lovely.
Yeah, I'll say that one of the benefits to playing, not just with experienced players, but also experienced DMs, is that you can be a little bit more, maybe not necessarily antagonistic, but you can definitely volley in a way that you can't with newer players or with newer players. So I think that's been really beneficial for us to be able to maintain tension,
Yeah, we
but
can
also
play
not make it disruptive.
we can play up a bit more prickliness and hostility than you'd be able to if you were just kind of like, oh no, he hates my character, he hates me.
Are you being so mean to me?
I'd also like to interject real fast. If the audience has any questions, I am collecting questions for a bit of a Q&A at the end. Please put in all caps before your question, so I can see them more clearly in chat. Thank you.
So who else? Who else wants to give their take? Who wants to go next?
I will say that it was. I knew, and obviously I knew going into this that we were going to be like streaming this for the long haul, but I didn't anticipate, I guess, getting attached this quickly to each other's characters and the narrative, the specific narrative that we were telling. And I think it was really interesting to see how quickly I just cared about everyone, even if the characters themselves maybe weren't necessarily bonding as much as I was bonding emotionally with them. But it's really interesting how horror modules like this sort of force you to care a lot sooner than I've experienced playing more traditional like adventure modules in the past. Because that sort of like trauma bond that you have, it really makes you feel like the only people that you can trust are the people that are going through it with you. So that was an interesting thing for me.
Yeah, no, I have really appreciated that. And I've also especially appreciated the one thing that really struck me about the difference between episode 1 and the stuff after it is how quickly kind of that initial camaraderie, that kind of, oh, we're all we're on a trip together, we're stuck together against the odds, how quickly that turned against each other once the actual bad shit started coming down. That was delightful. Not because it's nice to watch fighting, although it is good drama, but I did kind of enjoy that. Oh, huh. Yeah, no, once things do start getting bad, people start to show a bit more of their personalities.
Yeah, I think it goes back to just the initial experiment of not running it with just a group of heroes who are adventurers and on the road and we just want to do the right thing and be with each other. It's a lot more. I mean, you think about horror movies, it's always a little bit more interesting when it's not necessarily just a group of friends. It's maybe people who were brought together by circumstance and their need to kind of cooperate in survival or not cooperate and die. So I think it shows the premise to its full effect, the way that we've kind of done it. Not to pat ourselves on the back, but
that actually feeds in to our next topic of discussion, which is interesting enough. Marks of horror and doing horror gameplay fairly. And so I think this is something that we all have sort of differing experiences with. Some of us obviously have run Curse of Strahd more frequently, wink wink Dragna, than others. So what do you think of so far of the marks of horror and how they've been implemented and doing horror gameplay in a fair and balanced TMCR way?
Oh yeah, I would love to hear your guys' feedback on this, because a lot of these were things that I just kind of came up with, and I was because I have a lot of intentions behind them, but I'm curious to hear your first take before I give any more of my reasoning or background information.
At first, I thought it was just more for flavor, and I still think it's very flavorful. But when I was looking at it as a player and seeing where you were setting these things up and how they were preceding certain events in the house, it was a really genius way to either guide us or because we're all kind of playing people who are a little bit more cautious, it gave us a bit of in-character motivation to hesitate as opposed to just running in, swords blazing.
I think that at first they felt a little heavy-handed almost. just because even though they are in the book, like I feel like very few DMs actually take that to heart to, put them in as sort of guideposts. But yeah, like considering now how little guidance the rest of the module gives, you really do have to lean on those few guideposts that your DM gives you in order to figure out what is going to be dangerous and what isn't.
Cool. That's honestly like a big part of my original intention with them, especially given that, Death House as written has a lot of encounters that like we didn't even get to, both because of, directionality and because of like, where you were heading, and also because of those warning signs that I tried to put down, like the mimic door, for example, that in case someone doesn't know, there's a door in the Dungeon of Death House that, is actually secretly a mimic, and if you touch it, it attacks you. Obviously not great. It's a CR2 creature against, probably wounded, about to be more wounded, level 2 characters. And so what I decided was like, I want to give some way of warning people that this is a dangerous door and that something's kind of sketch about it. So that's where I led to, giving it bloodstains, dropping the, visibly half-eaten rat skeleton or body at the bottom of it. Same with like the Grick, where like there's this random alcove where like if you go into it, just a Grick randomly attacks you. And like a lot of people talk about like, why the hell is there a Grick in Death House? It's not even spooky. And my reaction was, wait, why is there just like this random alcove where you go into it, something attacks you? That doesn't feel fair. That's just sucker punching you with no reason, no follow-up, and it makes no sense. So I was like, what can I do to indicate that there is something dangerous here that should be avoided? And I thought, oh, maybe a pyramid of bones that the thing is just kind of collected over years of devouring adventurers' corpses. So that was my intention, was just like, as a rule, like if there's something dangerous, I want to give forewarning so that it can be avoided or at least potentially prepared for.
It's funny. I just as an aside, I didn't connect the Grick to that pyramid, but I thought it was just like an interesting clue into like the cult. Like it was maybe like an altar or something that they made, even though like I know that's not necessarily raw, but I just so it's interesting. I didn't even put that together, but thankfully we didn't investigate further.
So it's interesting that you say that you want to sort of foreshadow encounters, because the design of Death House seems to be sort of antithetical to that. So if you look at all the encounters in Death House, it seems to be more like the classic haunted house design where like things jump scare and pop out. Like the animated armor, for example, is indistinguishable from an object until it attacks. The broom of animated attack is indistinguishable from an object until it attacks. The ghouls in the basement are hidden inside terrain until they attack. The shadows in the basement are hidden inside terrain until they attack. The Grick in the basement is indistinguishable from an object until it attacks. The Mimic is indistinguishable from an object until it attacks. The Ghasts are hidden inside terrain until they attack. Like, there's a pattern here. It seems like it really wants to jump scare you.
So I agree with that tentatively, and also mad respect for like listing all those. But I think if you look at the module as a whole, there's kind of an extension of that. If you look at a certain encounter in a certain not so holy place, there is an encounter of some kind of dark creatures that just spring out of nowhere and attack. There is a particular well where if you look inside of it, something just suddenly leaps out and attacks. Like these kind of jump scare encounters are all throughout the module, and I think that in the absence of the Marks of Horror page, it would be evidence that Curse of Strahd aims these to be, combat heavy, combat focused, jump scares, so to speak. But in the context of the Marks of Horror, I think that what the designers intended was that all of these, every encounter in Curse of Strahd, aside from like a few random encounters where you can like technically hide and like turn off your lights or whatever, every other encounter is entirely non-foreshadowed and it's just a jump scare. But with the context of Marks of Horror, which explicitly says foreshadow the creatures, give evidence of their presence there, draw details to creepy, items around the room so people are distracted and concerned. And the overall vibe that I got was Wizards wants you to foreshadow these monsters, but they didn't, fully describe each of them for two reasons. First, that, not everyone is into that style of gameplay, and some players do just want to hack and slash their way through Spooky Land. But secondly, and more importantly, is that not everyone is scared by the same things, and some things are potential triggers or content that doesn't quite fit, or that, will seem cheesy to one group and worthwhile to another. And plus, obviously, they're working in the contents of their page count. Like, I would not be surprised if there were at some point one draft where, Curse of Strahd, Chris Perkins had like a working draft where like a few of these encounters had more in-depth foreshadowing. And then I realized this is really padding our word count. These pages are going to be too expensive. And plus, a big philosophy of 5e design seems to be let the DM interpret and implement it on their own. We just provide the scaffolding as wizards. So I think that, that was kind of rationalized later as we'll take out these in-depth foreshadowings so that the DM themselves can decide how they set up these encounters and make them spookier and predictive and, play up the horror atmosphere. Because as written, I think a lot of the book is just simply mechanical as opposed to jump scare.
Yeah.
That's interesting when you say about foreshadowing encounters. I feel like something you did very well with Marks of Horror, and something that is in the original design intent, at least I believe in the original Death House, is that, okay, so when you get a group going through Death House, after they're attacked by like the animated armor and possibly the broom, they can be scared of everything in the house. Like they can go up to the piano and think like, oh God, if I play a note, this could kill me. Like they could go through an empty hallway. So I think if you foreshadow the actual danger in Death House, then like you might also want to foreshadow some things that aren't actually dangerous, just because I think the purpose of a lot of these encounters is to make your PCs absolutely paranoid.
So I would tentatively agree with that, say for one point, which is that the armor is specifically distinct from the armor below. It is painted black, it is plate armor rather than wolf-headed. And this actually plays into one lesson that I learned while running the Marks of Horror in the dungeon, which is there was that one scene where I think like Kiva was investigating a bunch of chests, and the first one she found in like the alcove was just like covered in like demonic insignia. And she was like, oh, no, that's spooky as shit, I'm not touching that, and she backed off. And later, I think Lillison or Metron or someone found another chest, and this one was, undecorated. And originally, all of the chests had demonic insignia, but behind the scenes, I changed my notes because I realized if everything looks spooky, then there is no fundamental distinction between things that are dangerous and things that are not. I think in that sense, it still works to keep that particular chest spooky because of the value of the treasure it contained. But I think in terms of implementing Marks of Horror, it should feel fair, right? In that they should serve a reasonable vital warning sign. In Amnesia, for example, the monster is nearby when you hear the audio cue, when you hear its groan or growl or bellow, and you hear the specific playlist that accompanies a new monster arrival in the area. That is a measure of fairness in predictive gameplay. If that music played in random points where there wasn't a monster, then the player would not know when to expect the monster, and I think that would cheapen the foreshadowing and damage the player's ability to actually play the game at a reasonable level, because that would either encourage, just running wherever you like and, disregarding all of these warning signs and playing the game as if they didn't exist, or it would encourage them to never do anything at all off the beaten path, even if it seems safe. So I think it's a tricky balance, and I think in this case, you're right on the surface, but because the animated armor specifically is distinct visually from the rest of it, I do think it's, it's a little subtler, but I think it does work in that case. If it were just, one out of the 4 armors, I think it would definitely be more up your alley.
I think you also bring up a good point as well. Because the game is, for the most part, narrative, you don't have a visual cue to clue you in on what's happening. You just kind of have to imagine it. So like, you're watching a movie like Alien, and the cinematography kind of tells the story and foreshadows things, whereas we're all imagining this. So like, I agree. I think there needs to be a little bit of something. I think some jump scares are fine here and there, but I do think in the kind of spirit of fairness and survivability, and also just kind of atmosphere, creating those marks and then putting them in a place that warns us, but also is just could also just be flavor. Definitely helps to kind of convey the horror of everything.
Yeah.
I think that's... Oh, go ahead.
No, go for it.
I was going to say, I think for me, who, as it's probably well known by now, I've never run this. So I am really curious about how you all feel that Rose and Thorn fit in with this sort of like fair horror and Marks of Horror itself. Because obviously the, dead children in the closet trope is pretty standard in a lot of horror movies. But what do you all feel that Rose and Thorn's function is in Death House, and how did you individually deal with Rose and Thorn, and how did that differ running it this time as players?
Well, one more thing before we leave the Marks of Horror. I was just going to say that I think that Dragna, you did an especially good job with that one for the nursemaid encounter. Because, like, especially the encounter we had during the long rest with the frosting on the door and the humming, that kind of served to take the third floor from being, oh, well, wait, I guess we found the armor and all this stuff, and oh, here's a crib, to this is something's place. We should not be here. We should not touch that room. This is none of our business. Which, frankly, I loved. That was just added to the atmosphere tremendously of what would have otherwise been, oh, here's an encounter with the CR1 creature. Have fun.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And yeah, that was. I had some notes written down for what would happen if you guys took a long rest in Death House. A number of different, and sorry to keep stalling, Serena. I just wanted to touch on this real quick. Like a number of things that would happen, like if you took a long rest, including, the house shaking, the poltergeist activity, the nursemaid specter showing up outside. So I was really glad that I had a chance to use that. Actually, one final thing on Box of Horror, just because I want to share this. Because Linus mentioned the broom of animated attack. If you're not familiar, in the storage closet on the third floor, there is a broom against the wall that is actually an animated broom that will attack you if you get too close. So I think Linus is correct, and that's more of a jump scare, but I saw it as more of a moment of comedy. And so here is my description for the broom's event. So the broom attacks. The broom of animated attack attacks any creature approaching within 5 feet of it. It thwacks them upside the head as soon as they avert their eyes or turn back to the closet door, and then returns to its initial position without being seen, now cobweb free. No sight, just a broom that slams you on the back of the head and then innocently starts whistling.
That is delightful.
Wait, it whistles?
So I'm curious, like, what happens if I had mage handed that instead of like touching it myself?
That's a good question. As written, there wouldn't have been a creature next to it, so it probably would have just stayed still.
Could have just gone through the entire house with that broom in my mage hand. Chucked it in.
As long as no one got within 5 feet, yeah.
Chucked it in the altar room, like just like hi.
Broom versus shambling mounds. Let's go.
Shambling mounds.
Let's do it. I love
them
that.
fight.
Beautiful.
Yeah. About Rose and Thorn, as Serena was asking, when I ran Death House, I did not have Rose and Thorn do the possession mechanics because first of all, my players were trying to still sort of figure out what their characters were and how to get in their characters' minds, and I didn't want to be like, okay, now you also have this other thing on top of it. And I feel like if you don't do the possession mechanics, the children are basically the plot hook. They are the reason you go into the house. And then following a lot of the community guides, they sort of provide the key to unraveling the deeper, darker mystery of the place. But then, their stories just kind of ends if your players decide to just lay them to rest. But that is a very different experience from the experience we got here.
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting raw too, because I think a lot of people maybe interpret the illusions outside of the house being actually the kids, and myself included, to a degree, even though I didn't run it like that. But having experienced it, and then like having that contrast between these kind of cold illusions, and then having the kind of emotional ghosts that we later encountered, definitely helped kind of provide that contrast. And also, I think most people, when they play heroes, there's that kind of like plugged in sense of needing to save, and what are the most vulnerable people? Children. So it's always an easy lure to use against more heroic players. So I thought it was really interesting how we as a group approached that and how we all reacted to it. Some of us wanted to rob them, some of us wanted to help them. So yeah, I just think it was interesting how different it was not being a group of heroic adventurers reacting to them.
Yeah, no, I'll second that. And what I'll also say is, like, I think in my game they were very much kind of like they became the emotional driver of the rest of the story. Like, as you said, they're like, you're not motivated to go down to the basement to get out anymore. You're motivated to go down to put these schmucks to rest and to, shoot their parents in the face, which my players ended up doing with great enthusiasm. But I think I like it the way it ended up with us a lot more. Because I think having Rose and Thorn be kind of not even like friendly, just not hostile, kind of teaches the wrong lesson. Because I've always seen the overlying theme of Curse of Strahd as being kind of how Strahd's awfulness trickles down and corrupts other people to be bad. You know, these kids aren't evil, but they are hurting and scared, and they will mess you up because they are both of those things, even though they are not, again, they're kids. So I kind of love this.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear you guys liked it. Serena, what do we got next?
This actually ties again really well into individual Death House experiences. So either as a DM or individual experiences as a player that sort of stood out to you with this particular run of the opening to the campaign.
Well, my Death House is very different. Not just because it was set in 1983, but I sort of did things in a reverse way. So the setup for it was that I got the party there because they're teenage kids, and they encountered a group of bullies who stole something from them and fled into this Durst Manor, which is called Death House because it's like this urban legend, this famous house in the neighborhood that's creepy and old and apparently haunted. So when the party went in there, it was initially dilapidated, aged, like filled with graffiti and refuse and all this stuff. So it was kind of like the inverse, where you enter Death House raw, and it's like, oh, it's someone has actually lived here recently. And then so that was the first major change I did. It was kind of like this progression into from this dilapidated house that once activated became essentially the day of or the night of, where Gustav kills himself. I ran a lot of the different mods with it, but Gustav kills himself, Elizabeth sacrifices Walter, all that stuff. But then the second change I did was because I had the bully NPCs, I decided to have Rose and Thorn possess them, and there were 3 of them, so I had Walter possess the third one. But the Rose and Thorn ones interacted with the party, and the party didn't know anything about Rose and Thorn. So when these 2 NPCs were interacting with them in this very different, weird way, one of them was Thorn, so he was tearful and crying and emotional. The other one was kind of like a little bit more cooler and confident, but still scared. Having that experience unravel was a really interesting dynamic that I think was obviously very different from how it's, I think, usually supposed to be portrayed.
From the perspective of a player, I loved watching this one because of just the pure brutality of it. So for mine, I had a couple of very new D&D players in mind. So I started them off at Death House already at level 3. And my intention was that, they'd learn D&D, but Death House would be more about establishing the tone and the narrative and a lesson in here's the atmosphere you can expect from this campaign. And you just want to level up for a while. So seeing just the absolute horror of going in at level 1 and getting your teeth kicked in was very, very refreshing and terrifying for me to watch.
Yeah, going off of that, I wrote a bit of a thought essay on how Death House is supposed to foreshadow the rest of your campaign. And I wrote that because when I ran Death House, I did not run it like that. It was my very first time DMing. I was still trying to pull together everybody's backstories, still trying to figure out the sort of long-term character arc they might go down so that I could start foreshadowing early. And so I ended up running it basically the way that I had run through it when I was a player, which was very close to raw, but with a couple of the encounters blunted down. And the one thing that I did that I think was probably unique to my my game was that I had one of the players who was playing a native Barovian. I had his character show up in the middle of Death House. He was in the middle of looting the grand dining room, and so the other 3 went in still fresh off of their first encounter with wolves, and encountered basically this jump scare where they met their 4th party member. But the entire rest of the house, I ran it basically as Mandymod had provided a couple of community changes. So basically raw with a little bit of the story of Walter.
Nice. And I'm actually curious, given that you have that experience, how would you diagnose the expectations or the promises that this Death House has made for our campaign?
I would say that we know now to look for the marks of horror and to lean on those. And also we know this is more sort of player side generated. We know not to trust each other. And that is a big thing for setting the tone of the campaign. Like if you start out with the characters, very new and fragile relationships immediately unraveling, that sets the tone for the rest of how they're going to interact with each other, and hopefully for an arc where they learn to be able to rely on each other by the end. But we're not there yet, and we're not going to be there for like another year.
True. Facts.
Cool. Well, on that note, Serena, what we got next?
All right. So this is a topic that's particularly interesting for me right now. Avoiding metagaming and making tough choices as a player for the sake of fair gameplay. So obviously for me, begging Dragna to be like, did I hear her fall? Did I hear the shambling mound eat her? To go back for Lillison and having to be like, no, Kiva has no idea. So she would keep running and assume that Lillison is behind her. But how do you all find, now that we're 5 sessions in, how are you finding avoiding metagaming and forcing yourself to make those tough choices that as a DM you can sort of fudge the rules, but as a player you really can't?
We're 5 sessions in.
We are indeed. We are 5 sessions in now.
That's not real. It's not a real thing.
Having a cowardly PC definitely helps.
I think that it's really hard to resist the urge to metagame for good. Like, this is a trait that I love seeing in my players, where they only metagame for the sake of things that are good for the table out of character, like, keeping the party together, keeping everybody aligned in the same direction. And I think that metagaming is not an inherently bad thing. It can be used for evil, but it can also be used for good when you recognize, like, yeah, the DM is trying to put this plot hook in front of us. We should not just like turn our backs on it and say like, no, this is what my character would do. But for this particular game, like, it is easy for that to slip into metagaming for a like smooth, optimized run, which we absolutely do not want to do. So the line is hard to draw, and it's safest to just go like err more on the side of like stupid PC tendency, and just be like, yeah, my PC is absolutely clueless. Wouldn't even be able to put this together in a logical manner, even if it should be reasonable for them to be able to do so.
Yeah. No, I get that. And
So go on.
what kind of came across for me, especially, was that it ended up being pretty easy to not do to metagame the Death House itself, because I love horror. I love, like, playing into those tropes, so making a character who's willing to kind of stumble into things is a joy. But that being said, I think combat was a little difficult for me, in the sense of it got very hard to weigh the difference between, okay, I'm a competent D&D 5e player. I generally, when I'm not loudly telling ghouls about the illusion I've just cast, am pretty competent at, like, making sure the party survives. But kinda the 100% competent route wouldn't necessarily be what Erthrindir would do. And that's where I kind of run into problems sometimes, because, like, I want us to live. I want everything to go as well as it can. But also, like, there are gonna be times where the optimal route to survival or to winning or whatever is just strictly not in character for him. And that's been a lot tougher than I thought it would.
Yeah, that touches on something I was going to say, in that I think kind of what Kai was saying about metagaming for good versus evil, and then what you were saying about kind of trying to stay true to your character is, I think one of the good things about having not to toot our own horns, but having a set of DMs as players, there's a little bit more thought put into character creation, and I think it all kind of goes back to that. Like not a lot, but there are players who very much are chaotic in the way that is maybe more selfish and more self-indulgent, and so they'll create a character that is, very much in that style of, well, it's what my character would do. Whereas I think that so far we have a good balance of, it's what my character would do, but we've created characters who are able to balance their own selfishness and need for survival with realizing that, oh shit, we're trapped in this, and we kind of maybe have to work together a little bit in order to survive. So I think that it's been beneficial for us to have.
Yeah, agreed. And if I could add something from like a DM's perspective as well, is that like in terms of a meta sense, I don't know if it's metagaming or just, your actual senses of gameplay, but I've noticed that it's a lot easier to just kind of like drop my DM hints and like you guys just pick them up either consciously or unconsciously. You know how like you'll say like, the player says, I do X, and you say, are you sure? And most players will say, yes, I want to do that. But someone who's DM'd will instantly pick up on the hint of, oh, maybe I should not do this. So it doesn't even have to be that explicit. Where like, when like I think Amity was talking about like, hey, let's go, kill that plant thing by the altar, and I said, oh, you see like these roots rising up around the room and like just gently undulating there, not doing anything dangerous, but you think this thing is really big, and like I think it was quite instantly picked up on, this thing is big, we should probably not fight it. So like those little things that are just kind of like sprinkled in there as like a DM's desperate hope to convey a message to the players in a bottle without being necessarily too obvious, I think is a little easier to communicate with this kind of group than with a group of all players. But maybe I'm just making it up. Who knows?
And these are, also tropes and hints that longtime players can pick up, especially if they run with the same DM all the time. Like there will arise this sort of sub-communication of this is the way that my DM likes to present these things. So yeah, it's not unique to the DM experience, but having a group of all DMs really makes it a lot easier for us to recognize where to look for these hints.
Very good points. So on that note, given that we did bring up the mound, how did you all feel about that one must die scenario?
I'm still crying about it.
Oh my god.
I feel like there was a bit of metagaming in the one must die scenario. First of all, I think there was some, in my opinion, good metagaming, which is that Raw, the trigger for ending the one must die scenario and starting the combat, is something that's very easy to accidentally trigger. And so I sort of recommend maybe not letting your players accidentally trigger that. And two, I feel like just the fact that we are being watched by an audience which sort of often says, oh, this is my favorite character, I really hope this character doesn't die, sort of influences my out of character. It sort of bends me towards playing my character a certain way, I felt in that scene, which I maybe regret.
What do you think you would have done differently?
I think that if I hadn't been taking all of the audience opinions into account, there is a chance that Truffle would have died. And that could have been, like, honestly, fun and awesome. I don't think it's like definitely true that would have happened, but I think I did sort of put a finger on the scale.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. That makes a lot of sense.
That's true, but in the way I can also kind of see, a non-stream justification for that. In that Truffle, like just in terms of the party and the campaign itself, has been a very valuable source of light in a very dark situation. And I think even in the absence of the audience, I think it would have been a reasonable decision to avoid, keep Truffle alive, just because he does provide that really important contrast, I think.
Does Truffle get AL Dark gifts?
I hope
Truffle is immortal, don't worry.
Well, he has a dark power, so.
Yeah,
but I will
obviously.
say to that though, like the way that Dragna kind of RP'd it. By the way, I was like internally crying the whole time during that conversation because it's so adorable. But I think the way that Dragna played Truffle, like it would have made sense for Amity having been there, been a part of Truffle's life for 2 years, and having that bond, and then having someone speak to you in your tongue, telling you that, like in this very childish way, I don't know what's going on. Can we please just go? Like that's very impactful, and I think that I think even outside of what the community may have wanted you to do, I just think it made sense for what Amity does.
Yeah, no, I loved that. Like it's a very much a her move. Like again, we're still learning about the characters, but that kind of, all right, you want to consign him to death, you tell him that, you talk to him. That felt like that was a really strong character moment in a way I appreciated, because it just kind of I don't know how to express it more than that without knowing more about her, but that made a lot of sense.
I still think she killed a family and stole their pig, but
Yeah, not to put like too fine a point on it, but like I think you get these moments like in games where the backstory or the character hasn't been entirely outlined, and there's a choice where you define one way or the other, and this, for better or for worse, informs who your character is in a way that you hadn't thought about before. This was a time to see, is Amity intensely interpersonal and loving of those she cares about, or is she more cynical and willing to sacrifice something that she loves to save her own life? And it was interesting to see which way that pendulum swung.
Yeah, and I think for me, who had a really opposite experience with audience expectations, because now that we are past this point, I can say that, like, I think it was after session 2 that I messaged Dragna, and I was like, listen, I have a feeling that if we get to the one must die scenario, Kiva's gonna offer herself. Just the way I was sort of realizing her story, and the way that she was looking at Death House, and the way that she was looking at her own role. I had sort of had this in the back of my mind for a few sessions. And so I also didn't want to like advertise that too much, and just see where it would go. But when it got to that point where we were like arguing, and Kiva didn't want to see Amity die, but it seemed like the only solution was that, okay, I can do this myself, and it can be some little bit of good. For me, that was really interesting, because I know, there were 1 or 2 people that were like, I swear to God, if Kiva dies. And I was like, listen, I was preparing for this for like a few sessions of like, all right. And this is sort of goes into what I was, going to talk about a little bit later, which is like, how do you play a character that doesn't want to continue the adventure? And so it was really interesting to find that balance, and to have to find a reason for me to keep a character going who maybe has given up well before the adventure has even started.
Well, I think that you also, just to kind of bring up a previous point, but also to kind of tie in what you're saying, that moment between Metreon and Kiva in the party, where he was like, I'll fucking do it if you want me to. I think in the hands of maybe either a newer party or maybe a more chaotic party, that would have gone a very different way. But I think that we all kind of had the restraint to let the scene play out as it would, as opposed to just kind of like shooting first and asking questions later, which I thought was, which I appreciated.
Yeah, in a way, I kind of really appreciated the role that I think both Erthrindir and Lillicent have played in kind of acting as like a speed break on the rest of the party in a lot of ways. Just because like you sometimes do have to have those kinds of characters, or you wind up with those kinds of characters who, aren't trying to, say no fun allowed, but they are, kind of a check on a more, chaotic branch of the party's impulses. And it's been interesting to watch those interactions and see those dynamics develop.
And of course, they're the elves, so it makes sense.
Oh, yeah.
I'm only half of
Man.
Oops, all ears.
Oops, all ears.
So much time spent going through, here are all the amazing things that, Foundry can do for Torchlight, and when players are plunged into darkness, and Ben's like, sorry, Harrison, everyone can see in the dark.
Oh yeah, that was yeah. I felt that too.
It can actually track, it counts down your number of torches and uses them up, and Dragon is basically like, Harrison, stop talking, it's not needed.
Yep. Alas.
Yep.
All right.
We still
So
get attached
go ahead.
we still get attached to light for psychological reasons, I think. So we're
Yes.
still going to be using those.
And also advantage on those, and also not having disadvantage on those perception checks.
Yeah.
So, how did we all feel about that escape sequence? Because after One Must Die, we pretty much, threw the shit at the fan and then had to run. Although I do love the idea of just fucking triggering that mound into attacking us, but it definitely made for a very stressful escape sequence. So, what were everyone's thoughts about that?
Okay, I will step in first and say this just from a game designer perspective. Fuck that escape sequence. Who the
You know
fuck
what?
that was a good idea?
No.
Fuck
no.
Death House. All my homies
it.
hate Death House.
Fuck raw
Seconded.
Death House.
Like everything up to that is fun. You can manage it with marks of horror. You can balance it. You can warn the players away. You can have them make interesting choices. But the ending is just a meat grinder, like worse, like comparable to Tomb of Annihilation. It's ridiculous. Like between the DPS of the rat swarms, if you get enough of them, the fact that you can't stay in rooms full of poison gas to predict the blades, like the fact that you're level 2, like, and the blades like they could have made them 1d10 slashing, but they made them 2d10. They knew what the hell they were doing. That's enough to just instantly KO. Like if you're a wizard with like +1 Constitution at first level, you start with 7. Let's say you roll the average, you go to let's say +1 plus
12.
4. Yeah, so you go to 12. Congratulations. The average damage of one of those blades is 11. Just by going through one and failing a single acrobatics check, which you're probably not very good at, is almost an instant death sentence on its own if you've already lost any hit points. Like, it's insane. And I don't know what they were thinking when they put that together.
Yeah, words for you, Perkins.
Yeah, when I played through this as a player, we got through the fourth floor with the blades in the sides, and then the DM was just like, nope, like I'm just gonna hand wave the rest of it. You guys all make it out. And when I ran it, I took out that sequence entirely. I did go with Mandy's recommendation that no matter what choice the party makes on the altar, it should feel like the wrong choice and the mound should awaken. So sorry to my players in the chat who are learning this for the first time now. You're going to fight that thing like no matter what you did. But afterwards, the house just, like I said, no, I'm not going to do this. The house just lets you out.
Honestly, like I've run that in my own game. In my reloaded game, I had that same situation where like no matter what they do, I'm going to have the mountain rise. But like in the context of this campaign, I feel like quantum ogreing it in that sense would have been the wrong decision just because of the promise that it sets. And that like Curse of Strahd especially, and with Strahd himself, is a situation where if you placate the evil monster, you buy yourself more time. And I think that teaching the lesson that trying to placate evil is always bad damages some chance for, like the dinner with Strahd. Like a lot of parties will just not accept that invitation if they know that, placating evil things always leads to death. I mean, obviously in this case, it actually does lead to death, but you can't run that con on them if they already know otherwise.
Not a sustainable con.
Yeah, exactly.
Regrettably.
I like the idea of an escape sequence, definitely. Like, it seems a lot of your complaints about the escape sequence there was that it's just, too deadly. But the idea of, like, a climactic escape, that's something which you don't often get in D&D. Usually it's a climactic fight. I, for example, ran it as sort of like a homebrewed skill challenge with maybe a little bit more variety than the scythes and maybe, a little less deadly. And I thought it was awesome.
Yeah,
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
second that.
Yeah, like when I made it as a skill challenge and reloaded, sorry, Jack, just quickly, I was like looking over and like, maybe this is too deadly. Like there's too much of a chance of like one or two characters just like never making it out alive. And then I actually run it, rules as written. I'm like, fuck, there's a real good chance that like nobody could have made it out. So I'm like, maybe that's actually a little easier.
Yeah, I mean, when I ran it, they were already getting so demolished by Mrs. Durst. At that point, I was just like, I can't like have scythes bursting out and having them try to make acrobatics checks. So I hand waved those, but I had everything that was in the house, like the wolves and the weird spider that's kind of hinted at in the kids' room, and all these other elements kind of coming to life and chasing after them. So I just wanted to push like this narrative panic as opposed to like, hey, roll an acrobatics check, and if you fail, you will die, which I think is more sustainable, but maybe not as dangerous, but also maybe more fun.
That's exactly how I did it. I think it worked really well for me as well.
Yeah, like one weird thing about Death House is that once you get into like one of the areas without gas, like there's not actually anything stopping you from just taking a long rest there if you wanted to.
Oh man, we could have done that.
Yeah, there's nothing. It's not like other than marks of horror, I could not have legally thrown anything at you.
I mean, no reasonable PC would do this.
Yeah, sure, but like there's technically nothing. There's no gas. The house isn't actually coming down. Like I specifically had to stop shaking when you get to the top floor to indicate you can now escape at your own pace and you can take the time to study these blades.
Yeah.
And like because as written, the players just know there's gas in some rooms, there's blades in doors, and the walls are shitty. But like beyond that, like there's nothing forcing you to escape. There's no actual urgency.
Yeah. It's really stupid. Like again, I'm with Linus. It's a great idea, but just also one thing I feel like we missed a little bit because we knew the layout of the house. The smoke and the poison gas makes any room that's in it heavily obscured. You're blind in that shit.
Yeah.
It's just ugh.
Yep.
I will
Oh,
say.
and yep. Oh, Zio speaks. What's up?
I speak, yeah. I will say that the shambling mound escape itself was really, really good. And I think like if you just kept that part of the escape, with him able to squeeze without any problems, like rules is written, that was really, really intense. And like I think that would be enough. And you couldn't like just you didn't even need to do the scythes and everything else. The shambling mound escape was enough, in my opinion. But it was very, very cool, and I love the way you did it.
I wonder if it would be better with just a shambling mound escape, and then the players like scrambling their way down from the 4th floor, and then you see that the mound has like burst through that secret door into the hunter's den.
Oh, that would be sick.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, vines bursting out of walls and things like that.
And like inside of the sides, maybe it's just the apparitions of the cultists blocking your way to the other doors, and if you pass through them, you take like 1d6 necrotic damage or something.
Yeah.
I will say though, credit to Foundry that those fog graphics were tight.
They were.
Credit
Yeah.
to Harrison for sending me those acid fog and WebMs.
Thank you, Harrison.
Thank you, Harrison.
More to come.
Yeah, originally we had a bunch of graphics for blades and like ambience for like side slashing, and it was really cool. And then my Foundry just could not handle the graphic load of running like 40 different blade GIF animated assets, and we had some technical difficulties where like Zio, like without a character token selected, and while he was streaming his Foundry game, could not actually hear the ambient marks of the sides. So some technical difficulties that were a little disappointing, but the more you know for next time.
The side sounds will be reintroduced for the podcast version, so look forward to that.
Hey.
That $3 wasn't a waste anyway. Nice.
What do we got next, Serena?
All right, we are next going to be, this is sort of a twofer topic. So we are going to be talking about the Dark Gifts Resurrection and the roles of the Dark Powers in Ravenloft. And then that's sort of also going to tie in specifically some questions for Kaya and Dragna about dealing with PC death as a player and a DM, specifically in the module, and then sort of in general as well.
Sure. So for anyone who's not familiar with it, the Dark Gifts Resurrection is not in the module itself, but it is... The reason we included it was because it is an official portion of the Adventurers League modification of Curse of Strahd, which is official material printed by Wizards of the Coast. And I'll note that, that's the only portion of the Adventurers League content that we're planning on using. The rest of it is, blocked behind copyright. You have to buy it off the M's Guild. And just beyond that, it doesn't quite fit with the vision of Curse of Strahd as most people run it. In this specific case, I chose to include Darkest Resurrection because, A, I knew we were going for a more narrative campaign. And so from the start, I let people know that I wanted to, try to stick with these characters as best I could. but also because I think it provides for a very interesting take on the idea of death and resurrection in Barovia, which already basically sucks. So I wanted, to show it off and show how death can be resurrection can be a double-edged sword, but also that, there is this kind of metaphysical other beyond Barovia, beyond Strahd, that is in some way pulling the strings. And I wanted to do what I could to kind of set up an expectation of where and when they would intervene, and what the consequences of their intervention would look like. So hopefully I managed to pull that off.
Well, yeah, I also think it emphasizes the fact that we're trapped. It's not even death is an escape. It's we're stuck here.
Yes, I was curious. Like, Kaya, what was your reaction when I switched back to you after Lillison had died?
Okay, so first off, I have been remembering this entire time that on our very first Jackbox night, somebody asked what you plan to do when somebody dies, and you mentioned you planned to offer a Dark Gift Resurrection. Apparently, people have forgotten about this in the months since then. But I was fully expecting that something would happen along those lines. I was a little bit nervous when it didn't happen right away, but I think that waiting until after the break and after everybody else had already started their escape sequence was a very good way to do it. Separately, Pickle has mentioned it in the chat a few times already, but and as I mentioned the other day as well, I am probably the most death consensual player you will ever meet. I love it when my characters die. I have played in probably about 40 LARPs, and in about half of them, they end with my character dead. And most of the time, it is because of something that my character did knowingly. I love this sort of heroic sacrifice narrative, but I also love just the sort of this character was led by a misunderstanding or their emotions or something non-logical down a direction where you can only just see the inevitable happening and you can't do anything to stop it. And I think that the fact that Lillison came back is something that she's going to spend a really, really long time coming to terms with, dealing with, and figuring out how this ties into her identity. And I very much look forward to doing that. There is a lot about Lillison that hasn't come out yet, and I am glad that I have the opportunity to continue sharing more about her story over a long period of time.
Nice. Honestly, it's kind of funny. Something that I was really hoping to do with the dark powers as they showed up, which is a lot of people will often change them to merge them with the vestiges, who some people might not know about, or kind of make them more like these divine presences in Barovia, these more active, more active kind of players in the scene. But me, I tried to make them a little more alien, a little more inhuman. So hopefully I pulled that up.
Oh yes, definitely.
Consents.
The soul consents.
Oh
yeah, that was a fun line coming up. I didn't expect it to catch on as it did, but it seemed to go over pretty well.
You know what that means? That means our meme lords in chat.
Some fun time with it.
The only way the soul consent could have been better would have been when Speak with Animals was used. If it was Truffle instead.
Yeah, I'm still not. I'm still betting on Truffle just speaking in a James Earl Jones voice at some point and just fucking with everybody.
Yep. I'm fully expecting it at this point. But yeah, no, I think I like the take that on the dark powers we went with. They should never really be something you can learn a lot more about. They're just kind of a thing that is, and I think, as evidenced here, we do not know shit. It was not a lot of people, at least that I've seen, run Dark Power Resurrections as this agreement, a pact. Which I mean, it was, but it's more explicitly kind of a warlock thing. This is, you want to go back for our purposes? All right, sure. There will be consequences, which I just adore.
Cool. So on that note, we had one other final big reveal of sorts. We had the revelations of Kiva's situation regarding with a specific one must die sequence. So what was everyone's in character and out of character reactions to that?
I knew it was going to be a thing, but I didn't expect it to be so grisly. And I'm thrilled as a storyteller like that. Serena went the whole hog with that. But yeah, I mean, it was it's a very unique take, not only to not be a hero, but to be someone like one of the things I'm really excited about exploring is figuring out Kiva's motivation, because when you have that kind of when you're resolved to just kind of die and you're pushed to that point where like, okay, well, you know what, if I make this sacrifice, I'll actually maybe accomplish something with my life, and then to have people around you saying, no, you're actually worth it, we can figure something else out, is very powerful, and I'm very excited to navigate that relationship once we're all conscious.
Yeah, I think backstory to me is only interesting to the extent that it informs what your character does from here on out. And so, like, as cool as Kiva's backstory is and as interesting as that situation is, I'm a lot more interested in how it informs her character, and as Jack mentioned, the very interesting sort of self-sacrificial, like, leading the charge that she did in Death House. That was really interesting to me.
Yeah, I'll agree there. And I think that is something I'm looking forward to, that interaction going forward, like Linus said, specifically because I think Erthrindir has a number of issues with that attitude for reasons that may or may not come up later. But I think, like, kind of now that the cat's out of the bag, that it's not just, okay, well, we kind of see fully to an extent where she's coming from. I'm really interested in navigating that dynamic because, like, you can't live with people and kind of continue like that. Or you can, but it's going to be really, really fucking messy. And so I am just super excited to see how that pans out, personally. Especially now that we've all got bonds, whether we want them or not. We're together in this. It's just what's that gonna look like?
How did that feel for you, Serena, RPing that? Like, I mean, it was obviously very heavy.
Yeah, it was definitely her backstory is definitely the most intense of any character that I have created. All of my characters have an interesting tie to motherhood, which I can get into if people are curious about privately. But I really wanted to look at, like I said, Kiva's rage is a trauma response. And so giving a trauma that is organic, but also feels like a fight or flight response, and something that could potentially be something that she could work through in Barovia separately of the mission in Barovia, so to speak. Because for her, we're not heroes. And so for her, I think, as of right now, the end goal is not defeating this sort of like big bad vampire. For her, it was just to get to Neverwinter and try to escape this part of her life. So it was really interesting to roleplay, because I have been in a similar situation as far as, feeling hopeless and not really knowing where to go. But I think, in this scenario especially, it was like you're hopeless because of the world and you're hopeless because of your life. And so which is the thing that wins out more? And for, I think in Barovia, which was an interesting revelation for her, it wasn't even the horrors of the world. It was still her own horrors that were the thing that was driving her most. yeah, it was a really interesting thing to roleplay, and definitely something that I'm glad I warned y'all about in advance, because I think springing that on a table can be dicey, especially, like I said, we've been playing together for 5 sessions, but you don't really know a table until you sort of get through the really sticky stuff, in my opinion. And so, for me, who believes very fully in the idea of mental health and and self-warning and stuff like that, and self-care, it was important for me to let you guys know, like, hey, this is going to get pretty dark, which also then took a little bit of the pressure off me, because I was like, I felt like I didn't have to spring this on you. I felt like, okay, I may not have planned what was going to happen, but at least I was aware this is where it's going to go. And the reactions from there were genuine, but it was a really interesting thing to roleplay, if that makes any sense. I feel like I was just rambling.
Yeah, I think that it was definitely by then not a surprise. I think you did a really great job laying down foreshadowing in the 4 episodes beforehand. When we got to that point, I at least was like, yes, that makes complete sense. It fits with everything that Kiva has been doing before then. And I'm also glad that we did all have that sort of pre-game talk, because, like you said, you never really know what's going to like trigger somebody else in the party. And I think that, well, obviously everybody knows like how Lillison reacted, because Lillison did her thing. And one thing that I want to point out is that we didn't really do a whole like, no, you are worth it and your life is worth it, just because that is not a thing that has worked for me in the past, and it's not a thing that has worked for Lillison. It, having a pretty much a stranger saying, your life is worth it, you're like, my immediate instinct is like, how do you know? Like, you don't know anything about me. And pointing more towards sort of a utilitarian view of it, of the things that you can do, is something that has worked for me in the past, and maybe I guess we'll see whether it works for Kiva.
Yeah, I think it also helps not to put that whole like, oh, the only people who understand this are people who've experienced it before, because I do think that's bullshit. But there is something to be said about actual strategies that work, and not to make this too depressing, as someone who's dealt with it, like, I never bought into the like, well, everything is special and you're special and your life matters, because when you're in that point, that's not what you want to hear. That's not what you're considering. And for Kiva, even Aries, like, there's nothing that you could have done. She feels that what happened in her life, and obviously I am not saying that victims of domestic violence are at fault for what happens to them. But when you're in that situation, and that's another thing that I have experience with, like, when you're in that situation, yeah, you do feel like it's your fault. You feel like you're not doing enough. She feels that she failed her daughter by not being able to recognize that this was not a safe place to have one. She feels that she should have done more, that if she hadn't raged, that she would have had time to save her. And all of this stuff that weighs in her mind that isn't rational. It doesn't make sense when you're looking at it outside of things, but to her, it's like, so for Lillison to be like, no, there's no way you can atone for it unless you fucking try. And that was, I think, a moment for her where she was like, yeah, you're right. What is my death going to do that me trying something in a different way through life is not going to also achieve? And so I'm also very interested to see how Kiva reacts to the fact that Lily is alive, because she, it was the first time that she really felt close to someone in a very long time. And the events, like, timeline wise, of the deaths of her family were fairly recent. It wasn't that long ago. I would say less than 6 months. And so she has not had contact outside of those 2 people that are now deceased in a very long time. And the first time that she was touched really in a way that wasn't violent was Lily taking her hand. And so I think, all of that stuff, it was important first steps for her to eventually find that healing. So I'm excited to see how that plays out in a place like Barovia.
Well, that was my follow-up question, was actually for Kaya. I mean, that was a kind of a major move for Lillison to make physical contact and like to initiate it. So, like, do we get any clues as to why that was the case, and what sort of triggered that?
Nope.
Fair enough. Tried.
Fair enough.
All right. On that note,
I will say it's probably not the reason you think.
It's all right. I'll keep the little inkling of a ship that I have for the two of us in the back of my mind until I get any real hints of it.
We'll just keep putting songs on each other's playlists.
perfect.
It's scabies.
Pining from afar like two actual women love women.
Putting songs on each other's playlists, is that what kids are calling it nowadays?
Spotify and chill, I guess.
All right, I'm done talking because I've been talking a lot. So I feel like this is a really great place for some freaking audience Q&A, my dudes.
No, Deadpool.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, yeah, that's my job.
You have to keep talking for at least a little while.
All right, that's
Yeah,
fine.
right.
So, my friends, the Deadpool was so much fun, and I will announce that we will be doing it, maybe not on a, like, who's going to die in the village of Barovia basis, but the Deadpool will be returning for special points in the campaign. But our first Deadpool was for Death House itself, and for all of you, Lillison obviously was the winner. So for the 7 of you, here's your special shout out. So that is Dark Archer, CW Lane, Local Levy, Sigma Spark, I don't know if this is the Creole pronunciation, so Crow, Creaux, and Unidentified Froggy. Congratulations. And there was one other person who didn't put their name down. So nameless respondent, congratulations. You too also guessed that Lillison was going to die. I'm hoping as we move forward to have like actual little giveaways to be able to do, but that is in the works on my end. So keep up the good guessing, y'all.
I see my husband and one of my players voted for me to die, so
Oh, that's so lovely. Lovely.
Yeah, consensual.
Then again, maybe he's just watched your LARPs.
It's true. Yeah, we're gonna have a talk. Anyway, yeah. Q&A questions. Wanna go down the list?
Yeah, let's
Like
bring
the
it on.
first question.
Shoot him up.
All right, so first question from Strawberry. Dragna, what the fuck?
I don't really have a response to that. I'm entirely guilty as charged. I do not have a response to what the fuck.
It's
It is
just like
the
the
fuck.
deal with it dog. That's all.
Yeah. Just imagine like my profile picture wearing sunglasses when it responds. Just deal with it.
Okay. First, I was almost going to say first real question, but these are all real questions. They're all valid in my heart. From Captain Cher, question: do you all have a goal for how quickly you share backstory secrets?
Well, for Metreon, it's definitely going to be a minute. I think it's pretty clear that he's not everything that maybe he says he is, and that is a reoccurring thing in his life.
I likewise for Earthvendir. God, I slipped into the voice for a minute. I think that like it's not that there's really like any one thing that's gonna come out and then suddenly it'll all make sense. I didn't really design him to be that sort of character. But yeah, I'd say probably at least midway into the campaign for him. Not like much longer than that, because I do like for stuff like that to be out long enough that we can actually play with it and give it time to change and breathe, but it'll be a minute.
Honestly, I intend to shed pieces of Lillison's backstory and personality very, very, very slowly. Like, maybe it'll all come out by the end, but probably not. But also, we'll see what she gives out in response to what other people are doing and saying.
Oh, come on. Amity doesn't have any secrets. What are you talking about?
Truffle is Strahd.
Truffle is the PC. Amity is the familiar.
I think for me, Kiva's backstory reveal only made sense because it was Death House. If we had started the campaign like I did and skipped Death House because it's stupid, it would have taken a long time for her to reveal stuff. But because of what happened in Death House and the way Death House is set up, there was no way that she was going to be able to hide this stuff from people in there. Because it explained pretty much all of her choices in Death House. I gotta say, it's a huge relief off of my back. There are still some secrets that she has, and obviously some things that, she hasn't expressed, but the big backstory reveal happened there. And it makes me feel a little better because I just know that I can just play with that now and play with how Barovia changes her worldview. So it's really exciting for me.
Love it. Nice stuff, everyone. I'm looking forward to seeing this juicy secrets come out.
You know all of ours.
Oh, I do, but it's so much more fun to just wring them dry slowly.
Okay. I'm also going to turn official question asking over to Harrison, who somebody in chat has requested more of his lovely voice. So take it away, Harrison.
Ooh.
Don't read into that. That was my little brother.
Angry little brother.
This is a... No, go on, Dragon.
No, I was going to echo and say I nominate Harrison to read the questions.
Okay, this is a second question from Strawberry Queen. It says, Dragner, still, what the fuck? No. This says, Jack and Kaya, how did you go about playing Metreon and Lillison differently once they had been possessed?
It was at first kind of difficult because I think, it was a fine line between being Metreon and also remembering those traits about Thorn, but also not being Thorn, because that's not what the possession is. It's just kind of infecting you with these qualities that he has, but it's not turning you into him. He's not as much piloting you as much as he's just sort of bringing up emotions. So once I kind of understood that, it was easier. But it made sense for Thorn to kind of jump into the most cowardly PC out of everybody else. So in that respect, it was fairly easy. But I will say, like, towards the end of Death House, when Thorn just kind of kicks everything into high gear and is like, "No, you can't leave," that was definitely like a test of meta gaming, because it was like Metron wants to leave, and me as a player wants him to leave, but now, like, part of me also felt kind of guilty in a way, keeping everyone sort of down there in that moment, but I also recognize that it served the story. So
Really did a good job juxtaposing the drama of Metreon with Thorn not wanting him to leave against Lillison actively dying, and just like Dragna switching back and forth between the two scenes.
Yeah, that was intense.
Okay, cool, thank you.
I would say that it was a lot harder for me to incorporate Rose into Lillison's character because, as many people have pointed out, they're kind of similar already, and the ways in which Rose wants to be bossy, I sort of viewed that as whatever like Lillison is trying to do, she just sort of like does as with extra force. But for the most part, people were already doing the things that Lillison wanted them to do anyway. So if you, I'm gonna reveal a little bit. If you go back and hear where my voice dropped lower than usual, those were the Rose moments.
And if you go back and listen to me crying, those are the Thorn moments.
Yeah, obviously they're not Metreon. Metreon would never cry.
No.
Yeah, I think I saw a question go by in chat of like, did you like plan for characters to get possessed? And like the answer is that, I didn't actually had any idea who was going to get possessed by who. I just tried to do what made sense for the ghosts at the time. And it was interesting how like, Metreon and Lillison were kind of like honestly the most fitting for their respective spirits. Whereas I would have been very curious to see, say, Metreon or Amity getting possessed by Rose, or Lillison getting possessed by Thorn. That would have been very interesting.
That would have been really fun.
Yeah, I feel a little bit bad about sort of rushing forward and taking Rose when Rose was trying to go for Amity, but we can't let anything bad happen to Amity. She is too precious and pure.
I did see a question pop up at the time during the session of just, guys, can ghosts possess animals? Just asking for Truffle.
I mean, he's already a demon lord, so they can't be possessed. So.
Yeah, you can't have two spirits possessing the. I mean, I don't know, guys.
Yeah, and I think given the circumstances, like, it's not like strictly rules as written that you can like intercept a spirit, but a reason that we weren't in initiative, things were happening on simultaneously, and I figured Rose doesn't care who she possesses as long as she hitches a ride. So at that point, she was just operating on pure instinct. Lillison steps in the way, she's just going to go straight for her. She doesn't care who she winds up with. She was just going straight toward whatever she could find. So I think it worked out.
Yeah, makes sense. I've got another question here. This is one that I've actually wondered myself. This is from Makawa01. So this is for Dragna. Where do you draw the line between running the module raw and having a sort of creative freedom to display things how you think they logically should be, like with the Mimic, for example?
So I think this ultimately comes down to Marks of Horror, in that, as given, I'm going to run the module rules as written, everywhere that I can. I don't plan to ever diverge from rules as written. I think, and this is something that I've had with Reloaded too. My general design philosophy is that I don't look to homebrew things, but rather I like to fill in the gaps of, where things could feasibly be. Like, I don't view a lot of my work as, expansions so much as patches. So in this respect, like, with the Marks of Horror, like, these are elements and tools that are already present in the module that I can use to fill in the spaces that are already permissible. Things such as, Irina's character are ill-defined in the original module, but there are places where, you can really bring that through. For example, she has a strong will. That's a little spoilers. But there's one character who has, she has a strong will. So, how do you emphasize that? And you'll see more when, she comes into play. But like, there are a lot of threads that you can tug on in the original module that I find more like invitations for the DM to expand. And again, like as I said earlier, this is part of Wizards 5e design philosophy, where they want to leave these holes for DMs to fill in without forcing them to homebrew. And I think that's a large part of my perspective, which is I'm looking for these opportunities to fill in the gaps with elements that are and tools that are already available to me, but I'm not necessarily looking to change canon, just explore its existing depth.
Good to know. We've got another question here. This is from Bjorn Kier. Do you envision problems arising later from a lack of healing? As the characters progress, how do you think survivability is going to scale? So that seems a bit of an open one.
Yes.
See, the funny thing is, we have two bards. Like, we don't necessarily have access to, like, healing prayer or, like, the really powerful healing spells, but for most classes, healing word and cure wounds is all you get. So, I think we're fine.
And my original party in Curse of Strahd had, like, no healers for the first most of the campaign. We just made freaking medicine checks.
Yeah, in my Curse of Strahd campaign, the sorcerer ended up being the main healer.
Yeah. People forget that, like, clerics don't have any unique monopoly over healing shit. You just gotta get the spells.
I think it's okay. I made Lillison expecting her to be flattened at some point, but I think it's pretty interesting that so far she has only ever gone from full to 0. She hasn't spent any hit dice, she hasn't gotten healed. It's just been like full or flattened. And obviously this is probably going to be a bit less of an issue as we get more levels, but it's going to be going to inform some interesting adventuring decisions.
Okay, thank you. And looking, I think we have time for one more. This is a question from Captain Shah. So this is question: do you feel affected by the danger and horror after the episode, or are you more enjoying it from a meta perspective, so there's less emotional impact when the curtain does eventually close?
As someone who appreciates the story, it was definitely effective. But I don't know if I was as affected as a person, just because I realize that it's fiction, and it's all a story. That doesn't make it any less necessarily real, because we're all immersed in it and we're experiencing it. I also think part of it too is kind of a it'll be much different when Metron wakes up, because the realization of everything will hit. But I think him being unconscious for the last third of Death House made it a little bit easier to kind of detach. But I mean, it was all very effective leading up to that.
I would say that usually I don't get affected by bleed as much as some people I know, especially in the LARPing community. Emotional bleed is a huge thing. For me, it lasts maybe a day or so. For a lot of other people, it can last months. Aside from a few few characters very close to my heart, I sort of tend to move on very quickly. And it's the same for this game. Usually after the episode, I just feel rejuvenated and refreshed. And I love looking at everybody's comments. The viewer comments in the Twice Bitten channel, they really keep my spirits up. Listening, now that I'm basically listening to the episode multiple times as I'm audio editing, it's sort of settling into my head more and more. And after Saturday's episode, I did crash very hard. And I expect that this will probably happen a couple of times along the course of the campaign, where afterwards, a couple of us just sort of hung out and voice chat together and watched Dragna play Minecraft. It was very soothing and also very necessary.
Oh yeah, I sure needed the hell out of that. Running D&D always exhausts me. I'm useless for the rest of the day in most cases, but this session especially because it was nonstop action drama, not a single chance for a breather the entire way through. I was exhausted. I was just done, and I needed that vibe session.
Yeah. No, I'll second that. And I will say that, generally, it doesn't hit me very bad, but, Saturday, I think it was just the particular combination of, the suicide talk was very high intensity and very emotional and all that, and then you go straight from that to get everybody out of the house or everyone's gonna die. It's just, it's not normally a problem, but yeah, I'm with Kaya. It hit me for the first time in a while, just oh, I need a few days off and a good cry.
What about you, Serena?
Oh man.
I mean, you're kind of at the epicenter for it, so I mean,
yeah.
I'm curious.
It's weird. I as many people have been incredibly brought down through just recent circumstances and living through this pandemic, and so for me, yeah, these episodes are the highlight of my week. But I will say, as everyone has sort of echoed, this one hit me particularly hard. And so I definitely needed a little cool down. I ordered a lot of really bad Chinese food and ate myself into a little Chinese food coma, and then went to sleep early, which was kind of nice. So yeah, it was I'm looking forward to sort of moving past that emotionally, but also moving past that story-wise, because like I said, now that I've gotten that out of me, I feel like it should be a little bit easier moving forward.
Let's hope.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and afterwards I also went to my local Chinese bakery and bought a ton of just sweets. So
sometimes you just need a shit ton of cake to feel something again. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I've seen said cakes, and you got an absolute haul. It looked fantastic.
it wasn't all for me, to be fair.
See, I would have eaten everything that
Yeah,
you had
fuck
gotten. It was
that.
like muffins and cake and like pastries. It looked so good. I'm sorry, I'm hungry now.
That's fair. On that note, I think, do we have any other questions, or is that all we have time for right now?
That is the end of the questions we've got listed today.
All right, in that case, Zio, you want to take us away?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you all for coming and listening to our casts speak. We've been very fortunate to have Foundry VGT as our sponsor, and they're doing a developer stream right now discussing their 0.7 version. So we'll all go raid them in a bit. Please act responsibly. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this stream. Thank you all very much for coming, and unless Dragna wants to say something.
Nope. I just want to thank y'all for coming out today. Thank you to Zio for handling the stream this time, and for Harrison for hanging out. To all the players for being so fantastic, and everyone watching at home. Hope you all are having an excellent day, and we will see you all this Saturday.
Awesome. See ya.
Y'all come back now. You hear?
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.
Take care.
Bye.
Ciao.